Alright, let me tell you about my family's farm. I'm William Carter, and I've spent my whole life working this land, just like my father and his father before him. We're talking 500 acres out here on the edge of town in rural Missouri. It's not just dirt and crops to me. It's my family's history, 3 generations deep, bought dirt cheap during the Depression. Those fields, golden wheat waving in the breeze, corn stretching as far as you can see, wildflowers popping up everywhere. They're more than just my livelihood. They're a part of who I am. So, it's harvest season, right? Busy time. But I had to duck out for a few days, went to an agricultural conference down in St. Louis. Trying to learn about sustainable farming, keep up with the times. Leaving the farm, even for a bit, always makes me nervous, but I trust my guys to keep things running. I pulled back onto my long gravel driveway after being gone a few days, and immediately, something feels wrong. The air's thick with dust, and I hear this rumble, heavy machinery. Not tractors, something bigger. My heart starts sinking. Construction nearby? I hadn't heard anything. My closest neighbor's a mile off. As I drive closer, confusion turns to straight-up dread. What I see, it's a nightmare. Massive bulldozers, excavators, tearing right through my fields. My fields. Uprooting crops I planted months ago, flattening the soil I've worked my whole life. Huge sections of my farm, just gone, replaced with dirt piles and debris. Workers in orange vests and hard hats everywhere, shouting instructions, running machines. The air stinks of diesel and turned earth. Makes you sick. I slam on the brakes, truck skidding on the gravel, and jump out. My boots crunch on the ground. Hey, I yell, my voice barely carrying over the engine roar. What the hell is going on here? One of the workers, big guy with a clipboard, turns, looking annoyed. Who are you? He asks, like I'm the one out of place. This is my land. I yell back, pointing at the destruction. What are you doing on my property? He glances down at his clipboard, flips a page, shrugs. Clearing this area for development. Orders came from the HOA. I blinked. HOA? Homeowners Association? I'm not part of any damn HOA. I said, my voice rising. This land has nothing to do with them. He shrugged again, totally uninterested. Not my problem, buddy. Got our orders. Take it up with the HOA. Fury just surged through me. I stormed towards the nearest bulldozer, waving my arms, yelling at the operator to stop. Turn it off. Get off my land. The operator hesitated, looked at the clipboard guy, who reluctantly nodded. The machine rumbled quiet. The sudden silence was deafening. I turned back to the worker, fist clenched. You got 5 seconds to explain why you're destroying my fields before I call the sheriff. He sighed, clearly irritated. Look, we're just contractors. Hired by the HOA to clear this land for a new subdivision. If there's a mistake, talk to them. We're just doing our job. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking with anger, dialed the sheriff's office. This is William Carter, I said when the dispatcher answered. I need a deputy out here immediately. There's illegal construction happening on my property. After hanging up, I paced around the edge of the destruction, my mind racing. How? How could this happen? My land wasn't in any HOA. Property lines are marked. Deeds are solid. No contracts, no agreements. This was trespassing, pure and simple. Destruction of property. And they were doing it under the cover of some bogus HOA order? By the time the sheriff's deputy arrived, things were tense. I'd managed to get most of the machines stopped, but the damage was done. The deputy, tall guy, no-nonsense look, stepped out of his cruiser, surveyed the scene. What's going on here? He asked, hand resting near his belt. They're trespassing, I said, my voice thick with frustration. Tearing up my fields. Say the HOA sent them, but I'm not in any HOA. The deputy turned to the clipboard guy, who suddenly looked a lot less confident. You got permission to be on this property? The deputy asked. The guy stammered, fumbling with his papers. Hired by the HOA, they said this land was part of their jurisdiction. The deputy frowned. Got documentation proving that. He hesitated, then held out a sheet. The deputy glanced at it, shook his head. This isn't valid. Mr. Carter's property isn't part of the HOA according to county records. You're trespassing. Shut everything down. Now. The workers reluctantly started packing up. As the machines quieted down, I felt a small wave of relief, but mostly just numb devastation. Acres of farmland, ruined. Months of work, gone. As the contractors left, the deputy came over. I'll file a report, he said. But you'll need to take this up with the HOA directly. They're the ones responsible for this mess. I nodded, jaw clenched tight. Oh, I will. Believe me, I will. That night, standing at the edge of the destruction, the reality hit hard. This land wasn't just dirt and crops. It was my livelihood, my family history, my future. And thanks to either criminal negligence or outright malice, a huge chunk of it was gone. But I wasn't letting them get away with it. This was my land, and I would fight for it. Woke up before dawn the next morning, the anger still hot in my gut. Couldn't sleep. Just kept seeing those bulldozers ripping through my fields. The morning sun didn't help ease the knot in my stomach. No time for frustration, though. Time for answers. Time for justice. Sat at the kitchen table, strong coffee brewing, my property deed spread out. Yellowed paper, my grandfather's signature clear as day. Proof. I double-checked the boundaries again, though I knew them by heart. My farm was independent. Always had been. So how did the HOA pull this off? Grabbed my briefcase, packed the deed, survey maps, everything I could find. Time to pay the HOA a visit. Their headquarters was this sleek, modern building in the middle of a new subdivision about 15 miles away. Looked totally out of place compared to my farm. Cold, impersonal place. Marble floors, fancy receptionist desk. "Good morning, sir," the receptionist chirped, overly practiced smile. "How can I help you?" "I need to speak with someone in charge," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Preferably the president." She hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said flatly. "But I have a serious problem involving your HOA destroying my property, and I'm not leaving until I get answers." Her smile flickered. She made a hushed call. A few minutes later, I was shown into a conference room. Soon after, in walks Barbara Hill, the HOA president. Middle-aged, sharp suit, radiated that "I'm in charge and don't you forget it" vibe. Looked like she ate nails for breakfast. "Mr. Carter," she said briskly, extending a hand I pointedly ignored. "I understand you have concerns about the development project." "Concerns?" I snapped, barely holding it together. "Your contractors destroyed 500 acres of my farmland yesterday. Land that has nothing to do with your HOA. I want answers." She raised an eyebrow, completely unfazed. "I understand this must be upsetting, but I assure you, we acted within our jurisdiction." I slammed the deed on the table. "This deed says otherwise. My land is private property. Never been part of your HOA." She glanced at the deed dismissively. "That's interesting, Mr. Carter, but our records indicate otherwise. The area was recently rezoned to fall under HOA management. Standard procedure." I leaned forward, fist clenched. "Rezoned? Who authorized that? Why wasn't I notified?" She folded her hands, calm and infuriating. "The rezoning was approved by the County Planning Commission months ago. Notices were sent. If you didn't receive one, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the facts." My jaw tightened. "I received no notice. And even if I had, you don't have the right to bulldoze my land. This is theft. Destruction of property." Barbara shrugged. "We were under the impression the land was part of the HOA. If there's been a misunderstanding, take it up with the Planning Commission." I stood up, my voice rising. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is an illegal land grab. I'm getting to the bottom of this, and when I do, you'll regret ever setting foot on my property." Her calm finally cracked. A flicker of annoyance. "Mr. Carter, no need for threats. We are a respected organization." I didn't wait to hear the rest. Grabbed my documents, stormed out, slammed the door. Back in my truck, I immediately called Peter Hensley, my lawyer and old friend. Sharp guy, knows how to handle bullies like the HOA. "Peter," I said, explaining everything, "they destroyed my land, claimed it was rezoned, said I was notified. It's all lies." Peter listened carefully. "Sounds like more than a mistake. William, rezoning without consent, especially on that scale? Highly suspect. Let me start digging into the county records, see what I can find." "Thanks, Pete," I said, voice heavy. "Need this resolved fast. The damage is already huge." "I'll do my best," he promised. "Meanwhile, document everything. Photos, videos, receipts for any cleanup you do. More evidence, stronger case." I spent the rest of the day doing just that. Walking the ruined fields, camera in hand. Cataloging the destruction, broken irrigation, uprooted trees, compacted soil. The scale of it was sickening. As the sun set, I sat on my tailgate, thinking about my grandpa working this land with a horse and plow, my dad bringing in machinery. Felt like I was failing them. That evening, Peter called back. "Got some preliminary info," he said. "Looks like the HOA did submit a rezoning proposal 6 months ago. Claimed it was for community expansion. And here's the kicker, they included your property, saying you consented. Consented? I never signed anything. Exactly, Peter said grimly. They attached a consent form, supposedly signed by you. We need to get a copy, but I smell fraud, William. Outright forgery. Fraud. The word hung in the air. They didn't just trespass, they forged my name to steal my land. My anger solidified into cold resolve. They picked the wrong farmer to mess with. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was about justice. Woke up before the sun, that word. Fraud, echoing in my head. Anger mixed with a weird kind of disbelief. How could they think they could get away with forging my name, destroying my land? I knew right then, this wasn't just about getting my property back. It was about making sure these HOA tyrants faced consequences. I spent the morning on the phone with Peter, strategizing. He was already digging into the county rezoning documents, looking for the alleged consent form. We need that signature, William, he said. Once we prove it's forged, their whole case collapses. While Peter handled the legal digging, I focused on documenting the aftermath. More photos, detailed notes on the damage, even started getting estimates for soil remediation and replanting. The numbers were staggering, easily hundreds of thousands of dollars just to fix what they'd broken in a single day. By late morning, Peter called back, his voice tight. Found it. They submitted a consent form with the rezoning application. And William, the signature is definitely not yours. It's a sloppy forgery. Doesn't even look close. My jaw dropped. They actually forged it? Submitted it to the county? Looks that way, Peter confirmed grimly. This isn't just HOA overreach anymore. This is criminal. Forgery. Fraud. We need to approach this carefully, but aggressively. Our first step was filing a formal complaint with the County Planning Commission. Peter drafted a detailed letter laying out the evidence. My deed proving ownership, the lack of notification about the rezoning, and most importantly, the forged consent form. We demanded an immediate investigation into the rezoning process and the HOA's fraudulent submission. I drove into town and delivered it personally, making sure the receptionist timestamped my copy. I wanted a paper trail. Leaving the Planning Commission office, I felt a mix of frustration and grim determination. Bureaucracy moved slowly, but the stakes were too high to just wait. Back at the farm, Peter was already prepping the next salvo, a lawsuit. Not just against the HOA, but potentially against individual board members, including Barbara Hill, if we could prove their direct involvement in the fraud. We filed for trespassing, destruction of property, fraud, and punitive damages, Peter explained. This forces them to respond in court, opens up their internal records during discovery. If there's a conspiracy here, and I bet there is, we'll find it. The lawsuit was filed within days. As expected, it sent shockwaves through the small town. My case became the hot topic. People I barely knew offered support, shared their own stories of run-ins with the HOA. It turned out the HOA had a long history of bullying tactics, but nobody had ever challenged them with evidence this strong before. The HOA's response? Predictably combative. Their lawyers filed a counterclaim, doubling down on the lies. Accused me of neglecting my property, claimed the rezoning was necessary for safety and aesthetics, called my land a blight. They even had the nerve to suggest I was harming their property values. Blight. I fumed to Peter. They haven't stepped foot on my property legitimately, ever. Standard tactic, Peter said calmly. Deflect. Blame the victim. Don't let it rattle you. We stick to the facts. The next few weeks were a legal whirlwind. Depositions were scheduled. Documents subpoenaed. Expert witnesses consulted. Peter hired a top-notch handwriting expert to analyze the forged signature. Their report definitively concluded it wasn't mine. He also brought in an agricultural economist to put a hard number on the financial devastation the HOA had caused. Meanwhile, I kept documenting, took daily photos of the barren fields, kept meticulous expense records for the cleanup I was attempting. The constant stress was wearing, but the support from friends and neighbors kept me going. The turning point came during the discovery phase. Peter got his hands on a trove of internal HOA documents, emails, meeting minutes, and buried within them, the smoking gun. Emails between Barbara Hill and the HOA's lawyer discussing the rezoning before it was filed, discussing how my farm was in the way of future development plans, discussing the need to secure the land. In one email, chillingly casual, from Hill herself, Walters won't know what hit him. Just get the paperwork filed. We'll handle the rest. There was even discussion about using a specific board member known for creative document handling to get the consent form sorted. Peter showed me the emails, his face grim. Thank me, I said, remembering Barbara's condescending words. They destroyed my land, my livelihood, conspired to forge my name, and thought I should be grateful? There's more, Peter said, handing me another document. The scanned copy of the alleged consent form they submitted to the county. The signature? A laughably bad imitation of mine. This, Peter said, tapping the forged signature, combined with those emails, proves intent. They knew what they were doing was illegal, and they did it anyway. Armed with this undeniable proof, Peter amended our lawsuit, adding the claim for punitive damages based on intentional fraud and conspiracy. The HOA's lawyers scrambled, tried to file motions to suppress the emails, but the evidence was too strong. The narrative had completely flipped. Now, they were the ones on the defensive. Local news outlets went wild with the forgery story. Headlines screamed, HOA president accused of forgery and land grab scheme. Farmer battles corrupt HOA. Public opinion turned decisively against Barbara Hill and the board. Despite the mounting evidence and public pressure, William knew the fight wasn't over. The HOA lawyers were experts at delay tactics. The legal fees were piling up. The stress was immense. But every time he felt like giving up, he'd walk out to the edge of his property, look at the damaged fields, think about his grandfather, his father, the legacy entrusted to him. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about honor. It was about justice. And he wouldn't stop until he got it. The trial felt like the final round of a brutal boxing match. Months of legal jabs, counterpunches, and strategic maneuvering had led to this moment. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, curious locals, anxious neighbors, even a few stony-faced HOA loyalists. The air crackled with tension. Peter and I sat at the plaintiff's table, mountains of evidence organized in binders before us. Across the aisle, Barbara Hill and the remaining HOA board members huddled with their legal team. Hill avoided eye contact, her usual smug confidence replaced by a nervous energy she couldn't quite conceal. The trial was a marathon. Weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, expert witnesses. Peter was brilliant. He methodically presented our case, starting with the irrefutable proof of my land ownership and its exemption from the HOA. He walked the jury through the timeline. The HOA's failed attempt to annex my property years ago, their sudden rezoning push, the forged consent form, the illegal destruction of my fields. He called the handwriting expert, whose testimony left no doubt the signature on the consent form was a fake. He called the former zoning board employee who resigned in protest, testifying about the pressure the HOA exerted and the irregularities in the rezoning approval. He called the construction worker who admitted the project felt rushed and they were told to ignore my property lines. He even called neighbors who testified about the HOA's pattern of harassment and intimidation. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, built a damning picture of a corrupt organization drunk on power, willing to commit fraud to achieve its goals. When Barbara Hill took the stand, Peter's cross-examination was masterful. He confronted her with the internal emails, the ones discussing the need to secure my land, the ones mentioning the board member known for creative document handling. He asked her point-blank if she had authorized or known about the forgery. Hill denied everything, of course. Claimed the emails were misinterpreted, the forgery a clerical error by someone else, the destruction of my fields an unfortunate misunderstanding based on faulty maps provided by the county, a blatant lie Peter quickly disproved. But her denials sounded hollow, her composure crumbling under Peter's relentless questioning. She squirmed, she contradicted herself, she deflected. By the time she stepped down, her credibility was shot. The HOA's lawyers tried their best to salvage the situation. They attacked my character, painting me as unreasonable, litigious, trying to extort money. They brought in their own experts who offered weak counterarguments about the signature and zoning laws. They tried to argue the HOA acted in the community's best interest, that the development would increase property values for everyone, except me, apparently. But their arguments felt desperate, flimsy against the weight of our evidence. The most powerful moment came during my testimony. Peter had me describe not just the financial loss, but the emotional toll. I talked about my grandfather clearing this land, my father working it, the connection I felt to it. I described the shock and violation of seeing bulldozers tearing through fields my family had nurtured for generations. My voice choked up a few times, but I kept going, wanting the jury to understand this wasn't just about property lines, it was about heritage, about a way of life they had tried to destroy. Finally, after weeks that felt like years, it was time for closing arguments. Peter summed up our case powerfully, emphasizing the HOA's deliberate fraud, their pattern of abuse, and the devastating impact on my life. This isn't just about one farmer's land, he concluded. looking directly at the jury. It's about accountability. It's about sending a message that no organization, no matter how powerful they think they are, is above the law. The HOA's lawyer gave a rambling, defensive closing, trying one last time to shift blame and minimize their actions. It fell flat. The jury deliberated for several days. The waiting was pure agony. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just paced the floors of my farmhouse, waiting for the call. When it finally came, Peter's voice on the other end was calm, but I could hear the suppressed excitement. "They're back. William, get down here." I drove to the courthouse, my heart pounding. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreman handed the verdict to the judge. The judge read it aloud, her voice steady. "Guilty on all counts. Trespassing, destruction of property, fraud, conspiracy." The judge then read the damages. The jury awarded me not only full compensation for the restoration of my land and lost income, but also a staggering amount in punitive damages, a clear punishment for the HOA's malicious conduct. The total sum was enough to bankrupt the HOA several times over. A wave of emotion washed over me. Relief, exhaustion, vindication. Tears welled up, blurring my vision. Peter clapped me on the shoulder, grinning. Across the room, Barbara Hill looked pale, stunned. Her reign of terror was officially over. As I walked out of the courthouse, blinking in the sunlight, reporters swarmed me. But this time, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt strong. "Justice was served today," I said simply. This was never just about me. It was about protecting property rights and holding bullies accountable. The aftermath was swift. The HOA, facing financial ruin and public disgrace, essentially dissolved. Barbara Hill and several other board members faced potential criminal charges for the forgery and fraud. The developer, Westland Partners, settled quickly, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. It took a long time and a lot of work, but eventually, my field started to recover. With the settlement funds, I hired the best agricultural specialists, rehabilitated the soil, replanted. Seeing those first green shoots push through the earth, that felt like true victory. The fight changed me, no doubt. It was grueling, stressful, but it also showed me the strength of community, the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. My farm, my family's legacy was safe. And maybe, just maybe, my fight helped ensure no other farmer, no other homeowner in our corner of Missouri would ever have to go through the same hell again. That, I figured, was a legacy worth fighting for. Months crawled by after the settlement, but the echoes of the battle still lingered. Sure, the court victory felt huge, monumental even, but standing out on my land, looking at the vast scars the bulldozers left behind, even as new green started to poke through the turned earth, I knew winning wasn't the end of the story. It was just the start of putting things back together. The fields, yeah, they needed serious work. Restoring 500 acres isn't like patching up a backyard garden. The settlement money covered the costs, thankfully. I hired the best agricultural team I could find. Soil testing, remediation, choosing the right cover crops to start rebuilding the soil structure, it was a massive undertaking. Seeing those first fragile rows of wheat and corn finally sprout felt like watching a miracle unfold, slow but steady. It was a long way from the thriving fields my dad and grandpa knew, but it was progress. It was hope. The homeowner association? They basically imploded. The lawsuit, the fraud revelations, the massive damages, it was a death blow. Barbara Hill, facing potential criminal charges, disappeared from public view. The remaining board members scattered like rats from a sinking ship. The HOA officially dissolved, leaving the subdivision residents to figure out their own way forward, thankfully without the tyranny they'd lived under for years. Good riddance. Life on the farm slowly, gradually, started finding its rhythm again. The quiet returned, deeper now without the constant undercurrent of anxiety. The morning coffee on the porch tasted better. The birdsong seemed clearer. The work was still hard, demanding, but it felt right again, purposeful, not like a battle against unseen enemies. The support from the community was incredible. People I barely knew stopped by, offering help with the replanting, sharing stories, just checking in. That feeling of solidarity, born from a shared fight against injustice, was powerful. It reminded me that even out here, wanting peace and quiet, community still mattered. We organized a couple of potlucks, celebrating the small victories, the slow healing of the land and the neighborhood. Peter, my lawyer, became a good friend through it all. He'd stop by sometimes, not just to talk legal stuff, which thankfully dwindled, but just to share a beer on the porch, watch the sunset. You know, William, he said one evening, most people would have given up. Faced with that kind of opposition, the money, the legal power, it takes guts to see it through. I just shrugged. Wasn't really a choice, Pete. It was my family's land. You don't walk away from that. The whole ordeal changed me, no doubt. I was still a private guy, still valued my solitude. But something had shifted. I found my voice, learned I could stand up against powerful forces and not just survive, but win. And maybe, just maybe, help others find their own strength too. The story spread further than I ever expected. Farming journals wrote about it. Property rights groups cited the case. I even got invited to speak at a conference about battling HOA overreach. Me, a quiet farmer, talking to a room full of lawyers and activists. It felt strange, but important. If my nightmare could help someone else avoid the same fate, then maybe some good came out of all the ugliness. Years have passed now. The fields are mostly healed. The wheat grows tall. The corn stands proud. It's not exactly like it was before. You can still see the faint lines where the bulldozers cut deepest if you look close enough. But it's alive again. It's productive. It's mine. Sometimes, standing out there at dusk, feeling the cool Missouri air, watching the fireflies start to blink, I think about everything that happened. The anger has faded, replaced by a quiet sense of pride, resilience. My grandfather bought this land during the hardest of times. My father kept it going through thick and thin. And I fought off the modern-day land grabbers. The legacy continues. It wasn't the retirement I planned, that peaceful slide into quiet country life. It turned into a war. But looking back, I wouldn't change fighting it. Because protecting this land, this history, this piece of my soul, that was a battle worth every single scar.